This is An Infinite Path, spoken word essays by Niles Heckman, some of which go on to become our documentary short subject films, half of which release freely here through the podcast, all of which can be found through your support at nilesheckman.com. The oses, consisting of ethos, logos, and pathos, are three pillars of persuasion. They stem from rhetoric, or ars rhetorica, an ancient Greek treatise on the art of persuasion, given credit to Aristotle, through his corpus Aristotelicum, otherwise known as the collection of his works. We are going to lay out a list of logical fallacies in the next private essay, but before we do so, much of it is predicated upon defining these three terms publicly. Ethos or ethical appeal means to convince the listener of the author's credibility by character, by who they are. Pathos or emotional appeal means to persuade the listener by appealing to their emotions, by what they feel. Logos or appeal to logic means to convince the listener by the use of logic or reason, by what they think. Much of storytelling harkens back to Aristotle's Poetics, which has laid the foundation for classical theater writing and other forms of modern storytelling such as cinema. In it, he wrote of these three pillars, which are at the root of idea selling, much of which today has been diluted into what has become advertising. As there is no other field which aims to persuade more, and advertising is now about telling a story in order to sell a product or concept. Ethos, being the Greek word for character, is often considered the character or spokesperson delivering the information. Ethos means someone knows more than you, is trustworthy and reliable. This is great if it's from a wise elder or just plain amazingly illuminated human, but somewhat neutral when it's from supposed experts or superior characters in their field. Professors, medical professionals, gurus, or worst of all, celebrities. This is why you often see a famous person in an ad seen on camera or doing the ad's narration, rather than just someone like your sister or brother. The spokesperson is said to validate the product and unlock trust in the consumer, air quotes, by having apparent weight and authority. And unconscious people will listen to them, whether or not they have product-specific expertise or something way outside and having nothing to do with their area of expertise, such as a famous actor trying to sell you power tools. Pathos is used in persuading folks for casual or moral responsibility, appealing and pulling at their heartstrings of empathy. Beer commercials are famous for this one, trying to always tie their brand in with their country's heritage. Or ordinary everyday people, cut from the same cloth, just like the majority of the audience. Another example would be TV commercials about sick, starving children in Africa with flies all over their face. Help them! Or oftentimes using animals, or loving cute baby ones at that, to make you appeal to a moral message. Pathos can be powerful and very important, yes. However, it is also king in what's called bandwagon advertising, which is the observer agreeing with another's message, who is then felt to be on the winning team or in the majority of a popular opinion. Both reoccurring logical fallacies which have been used as key tools of propaganda through time. Logos usually tries to be pointing out the facts to back up a claim, which through time have not necessarily really been facts, but perceived scientific facts, which far too often than not end up being some level of pseudoscience. Like drink your milk, it's full of calcium for strong bones, which gives a very gross oversimplification to a more complex and multi-layered nutritional issue. Or the old school 1980s propaganda campaign, this is your brain on drugs, showing an egg in its shell being your brain, and then your brain on drugs showing the egg being cracked and put into a frying pan, implying something that is supposedly logical based on pre-existing misconceptions or half-truths. Statistics, surveys, facts, and historical data can make a product seem like a more reasonable decision. Whether the data is sound or not is always another story. These modalities are often used together, for like the Infinity Stones from the Marvel Universe, they work best when unified. There was a famous 1970s American commercial of a Native American riding in a canoe down a river, looking like it could have been out of the old American times before it was settled by the Europeans. He gets out of the canoe onto a beach which is covered in trash, and then walks over to a freeway packed with cars, revealing its modern times. And a vehicle driving by throws a bag of trash out the window, which lands right by his feet. He's then seen breaking the fourth wall, as it's called in theater and cinema, which is us going from objective to subjective, meaning looking at the audience or camera, with a tear then seen coming from his eye. It was very common in the 1950s to have a family go out to a public park for a picnic and then subsequently leave their trash strewn everywhere all over the ground. This dump your trash anywhere you want mindset continued into the 60s and 70s and then started to more enter the public consciousness as being a bad thing which could easily be fixed. And this commercial, which was actually a public service announcement for 71 things you can do to mitigate pollution, was a result of the general populace starting to care more about the issue and then having public trash cans installed ubiquitously in American towns and cities. This campaign was actually extremely successful, as it used Ethos, the Native American figure, a type of person who is actually somewhat stereotypically to this day seen as being one with nature, or an authority on the subject, Pathos, saying, hey, all this trash everywhere is making our public spaces unattractive and having a detrimental effect on our environment via the tear coming down his face, and Logos, showing that this was a common occurrence which at a societal level needed to change. As a result from political movements of the time and successful campaigns such as this one, into the 80s and 90s, it became standard operating procedure to put your trash in garbage cans, and to this day, if you do not, you are the prick. Future advertising campaigns into the early 2000s have done the same for recycling and composting, and into the 20-teens for now removing the use of plastic straws and bags altogether. So obviously these can be used for good or not so good ends, but it is good to know how they're deployed. Usually separated by the numerator-denominator line of are they trying to sell me something, or are they just providing me with useful and truly educational information. When one writes and speaks, it's always best to try and insert rays of bright illumination into what may be somewhat stormy clouds over the reader or listener. This is achieved partially by exhibiting an inherent truth in what is being said, for we can subconsciously know the truth when we hear it. So even if you've never heard some sort of information before, aren't sure about it, or it's just plain over your head, there is something about important work which rings true to you. This manifests itself in each of the aforementioned modes, as it's better to inspire first, persuade second, and promote third, instead of doing each of those steps the other way around.